for those of you who are familiar with this modern Stoicism movement, you'll know Massimo, and he won't need any introduction. He's a professor of philosophy at City College in New York, and apart from being known as a major popularizer of modern Stoicism, he's also a very outspoken advocate for scientific literacy, skepticism, critical thinking. He actually has PhDs, plural, in genetics, evolutionary biology, and the philosophy of science, and he's a prolific blogger and has written and edited over 10 books. Most recently, in 2019, very relevant to our conference, A Handbook for New Stoics.
I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, maybe, or shortly, a little bit more than that, of introduction. But in the meantime, this is a good time to take out your pen and pencil and paper and all that sort of stuff, because this is going to be an interactive thing. You will do the exercises. Now, since this is not one of my classes at City College, I'm not going to go around and ask you personally to volunteer the results of the exercise. But it would be nice, actually, if after every exercise somebody wanted to share how they did the exercise. If nobody does, then fine. I have my backup option. But come on, one of the Stoic values is not being shy, because what's going to happen? People are going to, think badly of you. Who cares? That's not under your control. So, about this book that I co-wrote with my friend Greg Lopez, the notion of the book is that there's a lot out there about Stoicism these days, as you might have noticed. There's more and more about Stoicism. Now it's actually beginning to look like you have to be careful and selective about what you read, because there's a lot of books, and many of them are actually very, very good books. There's a lot of introductory books to Stoicism, but there's comparatively little, with the exception of some of the things that Don actually has written, that actually is directly practical, and you can look at this and say, oh yeah, now I see what they mean by practice. Usually the practical part is kind of left a little bit in limbo. What we did with Greg was sort of the opposite. There's very little theory in the book, although there is a little bit, because it has to be there, otherwise you don't understand what's going on. But it's mostly about practice. It's 52 exercises. Ideally, they're meant actually to be, worth a whole year of practice, if you want to. Although, if you don't want to commit to that much in advance, we actually give in the introduction a shortcut, and we say, okay, these are the 6 fundamental exercises that we suggest you do. So you commit to only 6 weeks, and then you see if you like it, good. The bet that we make at the beginning of the book is the same bet that arguably the Stoics have made since Zeno of Citium, which is, we all want to be happy. Although the word happiness means very different things to very different people, to many different people. But fundamentally, nobody goes around and say, yes, I really want to be unhappy. It's kind of an oxymoron. Nobody asks you, why do you want to be happy? Happiness is the ultimate good, right? It's not an instrumental good. It's not that you have it, you want it because you want to do something else with it. It's obviously a good thing. But most people bet on externals for their happiness. They want to become rich. They want to become famous. They want to become, esteemed by their colleagues. They want to be married. They want to be with a partner who loves them. They want to have all sorts of stuff and things and people's opinions. All of those are external. The Stoics' bet is essentially the opposite. So, I'm sorry, but all of that is actually, a lot of that is up to luck. It's a roll of the cosmic die. Yes, you can influence it, of course. You can work on your career, you can work on your relationship, and so on and so forth, but ultimately you don't control it. What is the one thing you control, according to the Stoics? Well, that's shaping your own character. That's really what you can do. And so if you bet your happiness on becoming the best person you can, and then let the chips fall where they may, that's the idea. And that's the same idea, of course, of the book. Now, we start the book with a famous bit in the Discourses, 3:2:1 from Epictetus, because it sets the whole tone for the book. And so I'm going to read it to you. It says, there are 3 things in which a man ought to exercise himself who would be wise and good. Of course, these days we'll say there are 3 things in which anyone ought to exercise themselves who will be wise and good. The first concerns the desires and the aversions, that someone may not fail to get what they desire, and that they may not fall into what they do not desire. Keep this in mind. For the first thing is desires and aversions. The second concerns, says Epictetus, the movements toward an object and the movements from an object, and generally in doing what a person ought to do, that they may act according to order, to reason, and not carelessly. So the second is a concern with what you want to, how to act or not to act in the world. And then the third thing, says Epictetus, concerns freedom from deception and rashness in judgment. And generally, it concerns the ascents. So the third approach, the third thing that it's important is to make as few mistakes as possible in arriving at judgments about things. These are famously, after a French scholar Pierre Hadot, these are famously referred to as the discipline of desire and aversion, the discipline of action, and the discipline of assent. And basically what they are is the discipline of desire teaches us to reorient our desires and aversions. We really need to train ourselves to desire what is actually under our control and not to be averse to things that are not under our control. The discipline of action teaches us how to deal with other people in the world, which is, big deal given that we're a social species. And the discipline of assent is the one that teaches us how to reason correctly about our impressions and therefore arrive at the best judgments that we can. So the bet throughout the book is structured along the three disciplines. So there's a set of exercises for the first discipline, a second for the second, and a third set for the third discipline. Now, as Epictetus himself said, there is a progression of these disciplines from a pedagogical perspective. You start with desires, you continue with action, and you end up with assent, because assent is the more difficult one. But that's only pedagogical. We go through the same order in the book. But in reality, in real life, if you actually have to make decisions, obviously, and act in the world, you have to act at the same time as you have to deal with your desires, at the same time as you have to make judgments. So all of those three actually go together. Which is why today we're going to do a minimum of one exercise from each of the three disciplines. I have up to 3, so it depends on how much time we're going to have. We're going to go through 1 at least, and possibly 2, maybe 3 exercises. So let me start with the discipline of desire and aversion. For each exercise, what Greg and I did was to get inspiration directly from a Stoic source. So each exercise actually starts out with a quote from a Stoic author, not only Epictetus. So to ground it in actual Stoicism. I mean, this is the stuff that the Stoics actually did say. But then, Greg has a background in cognitive behavioral therapy, just like Don, and so then we looked at the scientific, and my first academic career was as a scientist, so we looked at the actual scientific evidence for what kind of techniques that are that work well with these kind of things actually have evidence, are evidence-based, that things actually work or don't work. So the actual exercise tends to take into account what modern science has suggested works or doesn't work. So let's start with the discipline of desire and aversion, which, remember, is about retraining your desires and your aversions. You want to be desiring only what is under your control, and you want to be averse only to not having what is under your control. And the rest you have to accept, you want to train yourself to accept as it comes. The first exercise is on something about that we already have heard quite a bit about today. We call it discover what's really in your control and what it's not. So it's about the so-called dichotomy of control. The famous and obvious quote there is Epictetus and Enchiridion 1. Of all existing things, some are in our power and others are not in our power. In our power are thought, impulse, will to get and will to avoid, and in a word, everything which is our own doing. Things not in our power include the body, property, reputation, office, and in a word, everything which is not our own doing. You can see, if you read the quote carefully, basically what he's saying is what's under your control is your internal decisions, your judgments, and values, etc. And what is not under your control is pretty much everything else. Okay. So here's what the exercise consists of. So you focus, and this is where you come in. I'm about to give you instructions actually to do the exercise. So focus on something that disturbed you and happened to you recently. So not a year ago, but just these past few days or last week or something like that. Or maybe if nothing disturbed you recently, something that worries you and it's likely to happen soon, in the next few days or the next week. So pick one for now. The exercise in the book, of course, is done for a whole week, so you have several occasions to do it. But pick one mentally. Focus on one event, either in the recent past that upset you or in the near future that is worrying you, that is causing you anxiety. And then make a list of which aspects of that thing that worries you are actually under your control and which ones are not ultimately under your control. You may be able to influence them, but they're not ultimately under your control. I'll give you 2 minutes. Go. I'll wait. Okay. Anybody wants to volunteer without divulging personal details? You know, don't say, oh, I got mad at my aunt, whatever, the other day. It doesn't matter who that was. But somebody, yeah.
Sure. I have a meeting tomorrow, a work meeting with what I would label...
Let me repeat it slowly while you're doing it because for the camera. So you have a work meeting tomorrow morning, yeah?
With someone I would label difficult.
With someone that you will label difficult. I'm sure we all had that kind of experience. Yep.
What's under my control is how I prepare, my treatment of her, and my thoughts, so I can assume positive intent and stay positive.
Okay, so under your control are you prepared for the meeting, and you're thinking ahead of the meeting, meaning that you want to convince yourself that you need to assume that the other person is actually in good faith. And what's the third one thing? The third?
How I treat her.
And how you treat her during the meeting. Yep. What is not under your control?
What she will say.
What she will say.
Her emotional reaction.
Her emotional reactions.
Her opinion of me.
Her opinions of you.
The outcome of the meeting.
The outcome of the meeting.
Or her actual decisions.
Or actual decisions, right? Exactly. So this is the way it works. So what's the point of this kind of exercise? If you do it regularly, because it's easy to. So Greg and I have this dispute. I think that Stoicism is 1 part theory and 9 part practice. He thinks that it's 3 part theory and 7 part practice. And the joke is that typically between the two of us, he's the one that's more interested in the practice and I'm more interested in the theory. But whatever the proportion is, we both agree that the practice is more than 50%, right? So the notion is that in a lot of Stoic theory is easy to understand. A lot of it is easy to misunderstand. I mean, I write constantly about even professional philosophers misunderstanding Stoicism. But it's not just that. You don't just need to understand it. You need to actually use it, right? So if you do this kind of thing every time that you encounter a situation like that, then the idea is, and that's the goal of the exercise, to internalize the dichotomy of control, right? To shift from worry about outcomes to the kinds of stuff that's actually under your control. So you are no longer averse to the outcome because you don't control it. You're only averse to bad preparation on your part because that's the part you control, right? All right. So the second exercise is the discipline from the discipline of action. The discipline of action, remember, has to deal with how to deal with other people in the cosmopolis. And we live in a society, and so we always have to act in certain ways or not act in other ways. From the book, this is exercise 18 for those of you who actually have the book. And we call it keep your peace of mind in mind. The pertinent quote is again from Epictetus, this time from Enchiridion 4. And this is actually one of my favorite quotes from Epictetus. He says, when you're about to take something in hand, remind yourself what manner of thing it is. If you're going to bathe, put before your mind what happens in the bath. Water pouring over some, others being jostled, some reveling, others stealing, and you will set to work more securely if you say to yourself at once, I want to bathe, and I want to keep my will in harmony with nature. And so in each thing you do. For in this way, if anything turns up to hinder you in your bathing, you will be ready to say, I did not want only to bathe, but to keep my will in harmony with nature, and I shall not so keep it if I go to pieces every time someone splashes some water over me. Right? So this is about preparing yourself for situations that may be more stressful than you might think, or that you want to enjoy, and then at the same time something is going to possibly happen that's going to ruin that experience. By keeping harmony with nature, in modern parlance, what Epictetus will say is keeping harmony with the rest of the community and with yourself, right? So don't get upset. So don't overreact to situations. Don't get angry and start yelling at people and that sort of stuff. So there are 3 steps to this exercise. Step 1, visualize a task you are likely to encounter today or in the near future that you sometimes find frustrating. Mentally rehearse, I want to do this activity, but I also want to keep my cool by accepting what happens, or something like that, whatever works for you. And then finally, imagine yourself behaving calmly in the situation. So this is a kind of a visualization exercise. So I'll give you another 2 minutes. Close your eyes and imagine something that normally is pleasurable for you, but it may go badly. It may be ruined by something. And visualize how you're going to react. Tell yourself, I want to do 2 things here. The objective is to do the activity, but also to keep harmony with nature. And then visualize how the thing is going to go and you keeping your calm. So again, a little less than 2 minutes. Just close your eyes. It actually helps if you focus. Close your eyes and think about a particular situation, not just in general, but very particular situation, something you normally enjoy, but it may be ruined by other people. So, anyone wants to share a particular situation that they normally enjoy, but it may get frustrated? Somebody's been volunteered.
Something I can't control, someone volunteering to speak.
That's right, somebody's volunteering you this week. That's something you can't control. What's the situation?
The situation would be attending a conference downtown here in Toronto today.
Attending a conference today in downtown Toronto.
Taking the subway down here is something I normally find pleasurable.
Okay, you normally find pleasurable taking the subway. That's good for you. I live in New York, so to me that thought is alien. But yes, go ahead.
I've run into a situation where there are delays on the subway because of belligerent behavior on someone else on some other train that slows down the system.
Right, so the whole system is slowed down because somebody else is acting like, you would say, a jerk.
I say belligerent.
Belligerent, okay.
And then maintaining a calm and saying that I can't really control. I'm on the subway. I will get there when I get there.
Right.
There's nothing really I can do except choose to act like a jerk and make more problems or just...
Correct. So your possible options are either you say, well, this is completely outside of my control. It's not like I can actually go down the system and somehow solve the situation. So I can just pull out a book and read while I'm waiting. And if I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. Or you can get upset and make your situation even worse because you were already upset in the beginning. That's right. So my own favorite example of this kind of exercise is going to the movies. And lights go down, and the movie starts, and this jerk just 2 rows before me just pulled out the phone because he absolutely has to check Facebook or messages or whatever the hell it is that people check these days. And so that used to upset me a lot. Because I can't believe how somebody would do that. Like, how do you not understand that this is a problem for everybody else behind you? But then I started saying, well, I have 2 objectives when I go to the movies, right? One is to enjoy the movie, and the other one is not to get upset, not to get out of harmony with nature. And certainly I'm not going to enjoy the movie if I get upset. So if there is that person, if the person is in earshot from me, I might politely go there and say, hey, would you mind? Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, you still have options. You can go back to your seat and try to enjoy the movie, or you can go home, ask for a refund from the movie theater, and then go home and watch Netflix. Right? So you have options.
A secondary part to my earlier example was the same scenario, except now that it's a very crowded train.
Very crowded train, yeah.
With the subway completely stopped, and people are jostling because they're agitated all around me.
Right.
Feeling the same agitation. So I got a choice too. Continue to act like a jerk also and make everyone else miserable too.
Yep.
Or encourage that. Or just, again, be calm and say, I can't control this. And
exactly.
stay kind of calm and wait for everything to clear up on its own.
Exactly. If everybody else gets agitated and you just join into the agitation, that isn't going to make it any better. Right? Very good. Okay, so we're 2 down. The third exercise is the first one from the discipline of Ascent. So the discipline of Ascent is supposed to help us arrive at better judgments about situations, right? So using essentially, Pierre Hadot connects the discipline of Ascent to the study of Stoic logic because it's about learning how to think better about certain situations. So bear with me because here the quote is a little long, but it's worth it. It's from Seneca, from the letters to Lucilius, and particularly from letter 71, sections 30-33. The wise person indeed overcomes fortune by his virtue, but many who profess wisdom are sometimes frightened by the most unsubstantial threats. And at this stage, it is a mistake on our part to make the same demands upon the wise person and upon the learner. I still exhort myself to do that which I recommend, but my exhortations are not yet followed. So he's saying, He's basically practicing humility. He says, now, I know what to do, I still fail to do it, at least some of the times. And even if this were the case, I should not have these principles so ready for practice or so well trained that they will rush to my assistance in every crisis. He says, even if I try, I don't always remember immediately what I should do, what I should bring up to my mind to deal with the situation. Just as wool takes up certain colors at once, while there are others which it will not absorb unless it is soaked and steeped in them many times, so other systems of doctrine, that is, other philosophies, can be immediately applied by men's minds after once being accepted. But this system of which I speak, Stoicism, unless it has gone deep and has sunk in for a long time and has not merely colored but thoroughly permeated the soul, does not fulfill any of its promises. So Seneca says you got to be thinking about this stuff carefully, and it has to reshape your mind. It has to reshape the way you think about stuff. Otherwise, it isn't going to work. So how is the actual exercise going to work? Take a couple of minutes and make a short list of 4 or 5 handy Stoic precepts in your own words. So things that you think, short phrases that you think reflect Stoic thinking or Stoic advice on how to deal with situations that are going to be useful, but write them in your own way, in your own phrasing. Let's give a minute and a half or something like that. All right. Anybody wants to volunteer? Yeah.
I wrote, this too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
What if it was a gift?
What if it was a gift? Thinking about something apparently negative, it might turn into a positive one.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yoga bear? Wherever you go, there you are.
Is, Finding Nemo, just keep swimming.
Sorry, what was that?
Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. That's right. Great. Back there.
Don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally. Yep, that's one.
From the meditations, change is inevitable. If you don't believe it, look at nature.
Change is inevitable. That's actually one of my favorites. Yes, and look at nature if you don't believe it.
Oh, this is one I use a lot. A eudaimonic life need not be pleasant.
Oh, nice. A eudaimonic life need not be pleasant.
I thought of this today. Every cloud is a silver lining. It's the equivalent of the 2 handles.
That's right.
For the adversity, you have an opportunity.
Every cloud that has a silver lining is very similar to the 2 handles idea. If you look at it differently, it may actually help.
This one's from Inferno. You were not meant to live your life as brutes, but to be followers of virtue and knowledge.
Ooh, that's my favorite. Odysseus says those lines in Inferno by Dante. Yes.
You were not meant to live your life as brutes, but to be followers of virtue and knowledge.
Yeah. Fatti non foste per vivere come bruti, ma per seguire virtute e conoscenza. That's in the Italian, yes. Thank you. 13th century Italian, yeah. So some of my favorites are, obviously some things are up to me, other things are not up to me. Everything changes. It seems so to him or her. So that's her opinion, and it's probably a considered opinion. I just happen to disagree. I wish to keep harmony with nature, as we said earlier. And then also what Don referred earlier as the reserve clause. I will do this, fate permitting, or fortuna allowing, or something like that, right? It's like meaning that I'm always conscious that I'm committing to things, but other stuff can get in the way, and I might not be able, it may be beyond my own means to actually deal with the situation, right? So I think we're getting close to the end of time, not the real end of time, then my time. So let me conclude with, so there's a lot more exercises, of course, along these lines in the book, but basically that gives you a flavor, at least, of what it means to do exercises as a Stoic. Now, some of the exercises in the book are actually physical, which for obvious reasons we didn't do here, like taking a cold shower. That would have been logistically difficult for you to do right here in the middle of the tank, right? Or fasting for a day or two, something like that, or abstaining from alcohol for an evening or two, or something like that. Now, why the hell would anybody want to do that? Those kind of sort of almost self-flagellating exercises. These are mild exercises in self-denial. These are not, you're not supposed to be, starving yourself near death. or anything like that. Or you're not supposed to go out in the cold naked in the middle of the January winter, as Chuck was saying this morning in Toronto. That's not the idea. The notion there, however, is interesting. So if you do those kinds of exercises that sort of you deny yourself something, one of my favorite actually is the walk through the mall. I actually go to a mall, large mall where there's a lot of shopping of shops, and then I go very deliberately throughout every shop, looking at everything, and then walk out the other side without having bought anything. And I repeat myself what Socrates allegedly said, which was, I didn't know there were so many things I didn't need, right? So why would you want to do that sort of stuff? Because the idea is there's several reasons. One is, remind yourself that a lot of stuff that you think you absolutely need in order to have a good life or to live, you could actually do without. If forced to, if in a pinch, or if the situation changes, you could actually do without a lot of stuff. You are strong enough to actually go through a little bit of, you're resilient enough to actually go through a little bit of discomfort. But the other side is kind of the opposite. It's like a exercise in thankfulness. As Seneca says in one of the letters to Lucile, he says, I went a couple of days fasting. You wouldn't believe how good the stale bread and soup tasted when I got back home and I actually ate my first dinner after 2 days, right? So in a sense, it's an exercise in thankfulness. Modern psychologists often refer to the so-called hedonic treadmill, this notion that we get used to new things. The thrill of a new iPhone or a new car or a new whatever, it's great for a few days or for a few hours, and then a following week, you say, oh yeah, I got my phone. Do without your phone for a day. And then you'll see how you appreciate the fact that you have essentially a computer with incredible power in your pockets all the time that you can actually use for good stuff and not just for bothering somebody at the movies by checking your messages. Thank you very much.